Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Luba Workers Comp, a regional insurance carrier dedicated to providing reliable workers' compensation coverage to employers and workers in 13 states across the Southeast. With personalized service, trusted expertise, and tailored solutions, Luba helps businesses protect what matters most. Discover more at lubawc.com. And by JP Morgan Chase, a partner in financial planning. Looking ahead to retirement, growing your business, or for commercial banking, JP Morgan Chase offers advice and solutions tailored to individual needs and client well-being. More information is at jpmorganchase.com.
From Tsunami Sushi in downtown Lafayette, we're out to lunch with Christian Mader, editor and publisher of The Current. It's business, Acadiana style.
Welcome to Out to Lunch. I'm Christian Mader. Running a nonprofit might sound like a mission of the heart, but it's also very much a business. These organizations have to pay staff, keep the lights on, and provide services. Yes, they do rely on philanthropy, but they also need to generate revenue, build partnerships, and constantly make the case for their value, not just to donors, but to the community at large. Acadiana has probably hundreds of nonprofits, big and small, and to some extent, they compete, just like for-profit enterprises, though there's only so much money and attention in the world, even for a good cause. And what better cause is there than kids? Laura Linton is the executive director of the Children's Museum of Acadiana, a nonprofit that blends play and learning for kids and their families. Laura has a long history with the museum. She started as a volunteer and worked her way through nearly every role. She became executive director in 2023 and has since expanded programming, grown attendance, and taken on the everyday challenges of operating a museum inside of a 100-year-old building. While half of the Children's Museum's revenue comes from admissions and events like birthday parties, the other half comes from donations, grants, and scholarships. You know, the nonprofit hustle. Laura, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thanks for having me.
Annie Spell has seen nonprofits from the other side of the ledger and, of course, within it. A psychologist by training, Annie is also a longtime donor and board member of organizations like the American Cancer Society, Hearts of Hope, Miles Perrette Cancer Services, and the Children's Museum of Acadiana. Annie grew up in a family that modeled community involvement. Her grandfathers included both a longtime judge and an entrepreneur. Annie ran a small, focused clinical practice working with adolescents and did pro bono work for children in the court system. And in 2025, Annie was elected unopposed to the Louisiana legislature. A major vehicle for her philanthropy is the Tides Medical Foundation, a fund associated with the biomedical firm founded by her husband. Annie Spell, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thank you, Christian. Very happy to be here.
So, Laura, I want to kind of just start with, the business side of that. It's a little bit. You mentioned you've increased visitation, right? A thing that you have to do, like whether you're a theme park or a nonprofit children's museum, right? You got to get people to show up.
Yeah, correct.
Talk to me just a little bit about the growth that you've seen. What's actually started? Is it you changed the programming? Is it that you changed your marketing approach? How did you get more people to come to the museum?
Yeah, so coming into the museum, along with the board, we really have to take a step back and say we're this nonprofit organization. Our focus is to educate the community, educate children, and make sure that they have equal access to play. So a lot of our initiatives entailed access and allowing us to get rid of the barriers that would allow families who maybe couldn't afford to come to the museum to really visit. And it's a need in our community, and families are taking advantage of that. That helped increase our impact, but also we got out into the community. So we were at DTA, we were at all the festivals, we were doing all of these initiatives to create exposure for kids to STEM activities that they can't quite learn in the classroom because it's so structured. So we're kind of knocking down those walls and exposing them to all of these amazing things that we have at our fingertips.
So the museum's been around for how long now?
We will be 30 next year.
30?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And have you found that you were still kind of finding people who still just didn't know it exists? Was that margin still out there for you to chew
It's
into?
still there. It's still there. There are people right now who lived in Lafayette their entire life and has never been to the museum. They're 40 years old. They never visited the Children's Museum. And a lot of it just comes from, they didn't go when they were younger. They don't know it exists for their kids. So there's always ways to market more, get out into the rural areas, especially where transportation is an issue for them to get here. So those are a lot of things I and the board have been looking at.
Annie, you've been involved in a lot of nonprofits. I mean, I think in every role that a person could really have in that space. And I've kind of been curious, to what extent, whether you're thinking about this as somebody who's, a volunteer board member, or maybe you're helping them raise money, or you're a donor yourself, do you actually have to think about sustainability of the business model? Are you looking at that and saying hey, yeah, being a nonprofit, it's a nice thing, I'm glad you're doing it, but I got to know that what you're doing is actually going to last?
Absolutely. I think for myself as a volunteer or a donor or just an advocate for some of the nonprofits I've been involved with, it's twofold. It's a matter of sustainability, yes, and how are we going to grow and garner a strategic plan that works, but also married to outcome, right? I'm making my business to put my time and energy in things that I know based on just what I know in terms of what research says about child development, in terms of what research says about cancer treatments, in terms of what research might say about economic development. I choose to put my time and energy in things that I know the outcome is there, and that those good outcomes lend to other good outcomes. I call it like a keystone. If I can get A done, that lends to B, C, D, and E, right? And so things like the Children's Museum, in terms of its sustainability, yes, that is very, very key. And that is married to good outcome, meaning if the product that whoever it is producing is something that's desired and also lends to better outcome in other areas for those clients, for those persons that engage in that nonprofit, better yet, right? And then fuels back that sustainability, if that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, it sounds like you're saying you look for a data-driven approach, let's say, but if we were talking about this in terms of equities and shareholders, somebody would say, well, the data you're looking for is profit, right? But you're saying it's impact. What does it do?
Right. But at all that correct. But also then once you do show impact, once you are able to look and garner good outcome, that piece of information is valuable piece of information for donors. Yeah. Those pieces of information is valuable for garnering public-private partnerships, right? It's not just good business in terms of look for good outcome for a nonprofit. It's part of a marketing plan. It's part of the strategy and how you grow, right? And for me, it's a personal thing. Because for me, in working with children and adolescents, if what I'm doing is not going to necessarily bring out good outcome, I need to switch it up and change the game. If I'm going to spend time doing anything, it's going to be something that not only brings a good outcome for one variable, but also lends to the increased positivity in other areas as well.
But Laura, I mean, I guess from your perspective, right, I mean, what are you looking for in terms of an outcome? I mean, it feels like it's almost an obvious question, right, which is doing well, making space for kids to have child development. But I mean, if you were trying to sort of measure that in some way, are we just looking at the number of kids that come to the museum? I mean, how are you actually keeping tabs on the good that you are doing?
That's something that we're always trying to evolve and develop. And right now we're kind of in the mindset, and everybody's talking about retention, retention. People are moving to Texas for jobs. People are moving out of state. So what is the museum doing to help aid and keep that community pride and keep kids home from a young age, and really instilling that love for our community? So looking at it long term that way, but short term, still developing. What does that measurement look like? Right now, it's just admission numbers, and it's ticking up, and we're seeing the increase there. But what impact are we making long term?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious. Has the mission doesn't seem to have changed at all? I mean, I was around when it was started. I've a father. I have two kids. I've taken them to the Children's Museum, and it's great. But I mean, has your sense of how to execute your mission changed at all? I mean, my sense is some of the exhibits are still there, and I mean that positively. I'm thinking, what were the things that I loved doing whenever I was young? I mean, have you had to adapt to what understanding, say, in child development are? I mean, just talk me through how the actual program has evolved over the years.
Yeah, so a lot of the involvement when we're creating programs, we look at curriculum connections. Louisiana core curriculums, and how are we taking what they're learning in the classroom and embedding it into what we're providing in our programs and exhibits, but also tracking the trends of what's engaging children these days, because it's ever evolving. There's talks about AI right now, so how are we keeping it child-centered, keeping that imagination, but also bringing them into a place where they do want to engage and stay. So a lot of our programs, we kind of just fill out what's missing in our community. One thing we weren't focusing on a few years back was arts and culture. And then we had this wonderful program, Summer Play, where we brought in over 60 different performers, artists, authors, to really get kids involved in the different aspects of what we call community helpers.
I mean, Annie, you child psychologist, I mean, I'm not asking you to recite some stats, but give us a sense. I mean, what is the actual development impact for a program like that for a kid?
So for me, I'll try to be as brief and concise as possible, because
this is public radio.
There's
you
a
can
lot.
Do what you
there's
can
a
do.
lot
Yeah.
to say here for me.
Yeah.
So let's just first caveat that I would offer is we know that ages 0 to 7 are where you have tremendous brain development. That is where so many of your neural networks are getting formed. That is also where our brains are kind of getting rid of unused areas, right? And so anything where you can put a child in a moment where they can compare, contrast, seek patterns, engage in ways that is not just verbal or anything necessarily written with fine motor skills, but it involves gross motor skills. It's experiential. It is kinesthetic. It is all of the above in terms of modalities. Anything that we can do in those moments of 0 to 7 that offers that for the child to learn within their own environment is key, right? Paired with that, children in ages 0 to 7 learn best through play, right? They learn best through engaging in a way that is either we would maybe consider pretend play if someone's a little more sophisticated in their play at age 7 or 6, but also play for, let's say, ages 2 to 3. That basically involves observing patterns, observing sequences, and gathering those pieces of information and assimilating that. What the Children's Museum offers is a really, really diverse way in terms of the different types of exhibits where parents can bring their children, and that allows the child space and time that is real life learning.
Yeah.
If we're looking at how children in ages 0 to 7 learn. Yeah. And what I love about what Lori's done in the recent years at the museum is really, as she mentioned, really focus on some areas that we know are key for our children and how they're going to be presenting themselves to the workforce as adults. What are the areas we need to start presenting the kids in to make sure that they have a kind of a wide breadth of realization of things in their world, right? So she's been very good at making sure there's certain exhibits in there that are more current to the now demands of our workforce, which is so interesting, right? Why would we do that at age 0 to 7 or even 2 to 3? Why? Because it does start that young, right? It does start that young.
Wow. I mean, Laura, it's an image that I have in my mind of how a lot of the exhibitions work is often you find like a local sponsor, right? You've got an exhibit about construction, and maybe there's a construction company that's associated with it, et cetera. I mean, have you, which part is the cart and which is the horse? I mean, are you kind of saying like, I want to do an exhibit on this, applied science or applied technique or skill set, and I got to go find maybe a corporate donor who can help me with that? Or is it, I had a great lunch with somebody who wants to sponsor something that we're doing, and I think I can get them to give us money for that, right? I mean, like, which way's the cart, which way's the horse, if that makes sense?
It's both ways.
Yeah.
It happens both ways.
Yeah.
Honestly, my brain's always filled with ideas. And as I was saying earlier, I'm running out of space. I have so many ideas.
In your brain or in the building?
In my brain.
Okay.
But I'm running both.
Okay,
Both,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
I'm running out of space in my brain and the building. Because there's just so many things I want to develop, and there's so much potential there. And there is a lot of community support from organizations, from businesses who want to come into the museum. But also I reach out to a lot of people too and say, hey, I have this fun idea. Come talk about it more. And, Annie in Tides Medical was transformative in putting a kid-style biolab in the museum, which really is, you know, allowing children to see more about like cells and research development to encourage them. So a lot of organizations and businesses who tailor into our mission is kind of what we focus on, like who's education forward.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Christian Mader. I'm talking with Laura Linton, Executive Director of the Children's Museum of Acadiana, and Annie Spell, philanthropist and child psychologist. Annie, I mean, when you get involved in something, like obviously you've worked with a lot of different kinds of organizations, that feels like a very specific kind of engagement or sponsorship, but like is the benefit for you to be like, hey, we want people to know what Tides Medical is about, like sort of a halo effect, or is it the pipeline to the future biomedical engineers of the future? Like, what is it for you?
We want kids to realize that there are jobs out there. There's things they can do when they grow up that are in the biotech space. Just that merely alone, right? So that is the very self-serving part for Tides, right?
Sure.
We are offering this moment for kids to learn about this space and industry that exists. The side moment for me is that, again, this is offering very, very developmentally appropriate opportunities to learn about the building blocks of biotech. So for me as a child psychologist, that was a win-win, because that's what I like to put my time and my energy into, is those things that I know can bring out good outcome for kids. And so for Tides, it wasn't necessarily, make sure you know about our product. It's more about, hey, please know this exists in the world. Please know that this is a place in the world that you could exist and you could offer some help with.
I mean, it feels like a pretty unique space to be able to even do that. Right? I mean, I think, you mentioned like STEM, right? Just sort of big, we could, invest in a chemistry lab at a school. And I'm not saying you're choosing one over the other, to be clear. But I mean, what's unique about it is that it's like, I don't know that people necessarily think, what do kids want to play with? And they're like, biotech, right? But I mean, is it the novelty of it that makes it attractive? I mean, or is it just like, maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way?
I think it's the novelty.
Yeah.
It's definitely the novelty.
Yeah.
It's something that, being introduced to something where, maybe there's a squishy brain model that you get to manipulate, right? And there's some verbal instruction on what that brain is and what it's doing. Or there's some, maybe some red blood cells that are floating in a tube, right? And then, again, the child is learning and experiencing that manipulative, but it's the verbiage that we pair with it, right, that offers them that educational moment. So again, yes, STEM is wide and broad. Why do we do it specifically to biotech? Because I also think that when we're looking at our area, when we're looking at our state, when we're looking at our children, creating a workforce, creating an interest into that workforce in areas that can continue to diversify our area economically is number one. And also number two, for persons to know what the options are in those spaces, right? That's something I feel very passionate about, is making sure that we educationally present things to our kids that lends to make them a viable adult in terms of earning an income, being self-sufficient. And when kids are introduced to things that can offer that, the more widely that can be done, the better, in my opinion. So that's an Annie moment. That's not a Tides moment, but that's more of a me moment in terms of what are we offering for our children now to make them successful later.
Laura, I mean, something that it strikes me about kind of how the Children's Museum works is that, unlike a lot of nonprofits, right, you've kind of got an avenue to different revenue streams, right? And I mean, like, I run a nonprofit, and maybe the most annoying part about it is like, you're kind of having to, we can't like sort of input a, pro forma or a business model and say, well, if I do X things, I can raise this much money, right? Like, there's this element of donor relationships, cultivation, right? But some nonprofits, like, that's all they have, right? But the Children's Museum does have kind of an earned revenue model to an extent. I mean,
we do.
Do you think that, like, in a perfect world, the strategy would be built around the earned revenue side, where like you wouldn't have to worry about fundraisers anymore, you wouldn't have to go and like look for big checks, but you could actually do it with the work? Or do you prefer to have sort of that broader mix?
Absolutely. I think in the perfect world, it would be surrounded by earned income. And there are some children's museums, larger children's museums in bigger cities who do work like that. And
I'm guessing they're doing sponsorship kind of programs too, like they're activating space, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So half of our what we do, and all of our earned revenue goes towards salaries, fixing our 100-year-old building, as you mentioned earlier. And then a lot of the donations and sponsorships come from updating exhibits and doing specific enrichment programs. So in the long run, we would love to just run off of our earned revenue, because as we know, there are hundreds of nonprofits in the Acadiana area, and it's competitive, and it's a fight for funding.
Yeah.
So we're lucky to have that internal earned revenue, but we're also grateful for all of our amazing sponsors and partners who donate.
Annie, you're a skilled fundraiser. I'll say that.
Thanks, Christian.
You're welcome.
Well, I don't know if that's thanks. I don't know.
Well, you should say thanks. I'm saying, like, I wanted to stipulate that for the record, because otherwise, like, I don't know what credibility I have, but I'm going to say it.
Right, okay.
So you're a skilled fundraiser, and you've been involved in a lot of nonprofits, and I'm just sort of curious, like, because that's I think a thing that a lot of nonprofit leaders struggle with, right? Which is getting in and saying, like, how do I raise money? And I guess I'm just like, because I have you here, give us some broad advice. Like, what do you think makes a good fundraiser in a nonprofit?
A good fundraiser or nonprofit tells you what their mission is, tells you very specifically what they're needing from you as a collaborator, as a partner, or a sponsor to make that mission a reality, and then lets you know after the fact how it went and how that happened. And that happens in a real-time, constant relationship building moment.
Yep.
That's what I think makes a really good skilled fundraiser.
Yep.
And I think because I'm seeking the data, because I'm seeking outcome-based measures, I think because that's my lens, I think that's why I've had success in fundraising.
Yep.
Because I know that persons that are giving their dollars, their hard-earned dollars, to something that they believe in, and that's fine. And passionately takes you so far, right? And your affinity to something only takes you so far. What keeps you going as a donor, right, is knowing that what you're doing and what you seem to like really makes a difference, right? So it's that data-driven mindset, but also the relationship building all at the same time.
What do you think that most nonprofit folks tend to overlook in that process? I'm curious, like, if there's something like, if you could just give somebody that sort of advice. It's like, well, everybody knows to do these three things, but if you really want to get ahead, you got to do the fourth, right?
I would think, I don't know if it's an overlooking, but maybe possibly a lack of comfort in being told no.
Yeah.
To me, it's a numbers game, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask 10 people to help me support this particular thing.
Sure.
I'll probably get 3 yeses, right?
Yeah.
So if I only ask 3, I may not leave with anything. So for me, it's just the ability to know that it's constant exposure to what the mission is, and a lot of no's and some really good yeses. That's really good advice. The way I've internalized it over the years, people say you don't get what you don't ask for, right? So you have to come in willing. So I mean, like, Laura, did you've kind of came in through the Children's Museum. You did all the things, right? But I'm assuming that when you're like working the exhibit as a volunteer in high school, they're not training you to raise money. I mean, how have you adapted to that? I mean, I think a lot of people, when they get in a nonprofit space and they realize, wait, a lot of the job of an executive director is just to raise money. I mean, was it something you felt comfortable with up front, or something you really had to adjust to?
It was something I felt comfortable with because as my years at the museum, I was able to see firsthand what needed to happen to take it to that next level. So in the back of my head, I always had ideas and plans of if I was able to lead this museum, what am I going to do? And for years, that was in the back of my head. So when I came in, I was able to really make a list of, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and we're achieving it.
What was the first thing on that list?
Well, when I came in as interim executive, what I didn't know is that we needed a new roof.
That's why we all get into nonprofits. We want to put roofs on things.
The first thing was like, hey, we need $250,000 for a new roof. Oh, fun, amazing, wonderful. But
poor mission.
we achieved that in like 9 months.
Wow.
And a lot of it was just community support. And, a lot of the part of executive directors just going out, talking to people, asking people, and explaining your mission in a way that really people will want to help make that impact. And there's so much investment into downtown right now, so it's a little bit easier for me, I have to say. It's easy to talk up the museum. because it's a staple of the community and everybody kind of wants to see it thrive. So that support is there. And yeah, I'm able to make my vision come to life, the vision I've had for so many years.
You know, Annie, you've just involved in so many different types of nonprofits. I'm curious from your perspective what you see as the common thread among them.
For myself, in terms of the ones that I choose to get involved with.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go back to what I originally said. It's those that I know that whatever it is that I'm doing or whatever it is that I'm supporting lends to the betterment in other areas for that particular client, person, identified group that we're trying to serve. So for the Children's Museum, I know that the more play that's developmentally appropriate and done in a way that is really pushing towards knowledge base in certain areas, the more about that I can put in front of a kid at their younger years, the better, right? The data's there. The data's not getting collected actively at the Children's Museum in terms of that, but the data is strong in lots of areas of psychology. I know that, for example, in cancer, we only are as good as the research that we have, right? We're only going to be able to give people really good prognoses based on the data that came 20 years before that person is sitting in the clinic room. So you can't argue that, right? So, and again, someone surviving cancer lends to a host of other benefits for them and their family. So that's the common thread among the things that I choose to kind of dig into or support.
Yeah, well, I mean, the common thread obviously is everybody's just trying to make the world a little bit better than how they found it. Annie and Laura, thanks for joining me on Out to Lunch Acadiana.
Thanks so much.
It's been great.
My guests on Out to Lunch Acadiana today have been Laura Linton, Executive Director of the Children's Museum of Acadiana, and Annie Spell, State Representative and a longtime nonprofit board member. We edited this conversation to fit into our time slot here on KRVS. You can hear our unedited conversation and find out more about Laura and Annie by listening to the Out to Lunch Acadiana podcast. You can find and subscribe on your podcast app and on our website, itsacadiana.com. If you want to know what we all look like, you can find photos from this show on itsacadiana.com and on our Out to Lunch Acadiana social media. These photos were taken by Alicia Zachary Lazard, and you can find more of Alicia's photos on Facebook, facebook.com/alicia.zachary. Out to Lunch Acadiana is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsacadiana.com and KRVS 88.7 FM. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our associate producer is Chad Terrio. Our researcher is Leah Erdialis. Today's show was engineered by Dylan Babineau. I'm Christian Mader, the editor of The Current, Lafayette's nonprofit newsroom. To get the scoop on Lafayette, head over to thecurrentla.com. Sign up for our free newsletter. We'll see you here next time for more business and conversation on Out to Lunch Acadiana. See you then.
Out to Lunch Acadiana was recorded live over lunch at Tsunami Sushi on Jefferson Street in downtown Lafayette. Tsunami is open Tuesday through Saturday for lunch and dinner, serving sushi, sashimi, salads, and authentic Japanese grilled dishes. Tsunami welcomes casual dining or reservations. More information at servingsushi.com. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker. Established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Luba Workers' Comp, a regional insurance carrier dedicated to providing reliable workers' compensation coverage to employers and workers in 13 states across the Southeast. With personalized service, trusted expertise, and tailored solutions, Luba helps businesses protect what matters most. Discover more at lubawc.com. And by J.P. Morgan Chase, a partner in financial planning. Looking ahead to retirement, growing your business, or for commercial banking, J.P. Morgan Chase offers advice and solutions tailored to individual needs and client well-being. More information is at jpmorganchase.com. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com.